The Romney campaign is using the president's own words against him in a new attack ad. The commercial claims Mr. Obama is out of touch on the economy. CBS 4 political specialist Sean Boyd gives the ad a reality check.
As I said, we created...
The Obama campaign saw this one coming. When the president said last week the private sector was doing fine, you knew Republicans would have a field day with it. This ad by the Romney campaign lists all the reasons the private sector is not doing fine, from unemployment to lower median income to less home equity. I won't break down the claims one by one. They're all true. What they lack is context.
The private sector is doing fine.
It's misleading to say the president was responding to the figures cited in this ad. If you listen to the rest of his remarks, he's actually talking about some very different numbers.
We've created 4.3 million jobs over the last 27 months. Over 800,000 just this year alone. The private sector is doing fine. Where we're seeing weaknesses in our economy have to do with state and local government.
So the substance of what he's saying, and he explained this in a follow-up press conference, is not that the economy is doing fine, rather that the private sector is doing better than the public sector. But is that the case? Here's what you need to know. The private sector has added 4.1 million jobs over the last 27 months, while the public sector has cut 550,000 jobs. But the private sector lost about 8 million jobs in this recession, so it's still in the hole. And government workers still have lower unemployment, 4.2% last month, compared to the private sector's 7.8%. Meaning, even if you take the president's explanation that the private sector is doing fine relative to the public sector, it's an overreach. Bottom line, the president stepped in it. He knows it. And while it makes for an easy attack ad, what matters come November isn't what the president has said about the economy, but what he's done about it. I'm Sean Boyd. That's Reality Check.
As we count down to the election, campaign ads seem to be everywhere. Well, that means our political specialist, Sean Boyd, is very busy fact-checking the claims made in those commercials. Tonight, she gives a reality check to a new ad from the Obama campaign that attacks Mitt Romney on his tax plan.
If the Obama campaign is to be believed, Mitt Romney is the opposite of Robin Hood, someone who helps the rich at the expense of the poor. And this ad argues his tax plan is case in point.
Under the Romney plan, a middle-class family will pay an average of up to $2,000 more a year in taxes, while at the same time giving multimillionaires like himself a $250,000 tax cut.
That's spin. The claim is based on a study by the Tax Policy Center. Donald Marin, director of the center, says, and I quote, "I don't interpret this as evidence that Governor Romney wants to increase taxes on the middle class in order to cut taxes for the rich, as an Obama campaign ad claimed. Instead, I view it as showing that his plan can accomplish all his stated objectives." Here's what you need to know. Under Romney's plan, the Bush tax cuts would become permanent. Everyone would see their income tax rate cut 20%, and the alternative minimum tax and estate tax would be eliminated. To make up for the lost revenue, Romney says he would get rid of many of the deductions, credits, and loopholes built into the tax code for the upper income earners. He says he can accomplish all of this without adding to the deficit or raising taxes on the middle class. Problem is, the Tax Policy Center says it's mathematically impossible to do all Romney says he will. Something has to give, or taxes for the middle class will go up. At least that's the conclusion based on the information available. The authors say a full review of Romney's plan isn't possible without more details, specifically which tax loopholes would be closed. Romney counters, because his plan also lowers the corporate tax rate, it will result in economic growth not factored into the analysis. Bottom line, tax reform is hard, practically and politically. It's easy to promise cuts, harder to pay for them. While Romney's plan may be too ambitious, on the upside, we're talking about real policy issues, not likability. I'm Sean Boyd. That's Reality Check.
CBS 4's Sean Boyd has been covering the convention in Tampa all week for us. And Sean, one of the goals was to get people more in touch with Mitt Romney, the person, and not just Mitt Romney, the politician and businessman.
And Karen, he definitely did that tonight. He revealed touching details about his parents' love and seemed at ease when talking about his Mormon faith. He was at times funny, describing raising 5 boys who seemed to, he says, have a new world war every night, and yet also emotional when he admitted he'd give anything to break up one more fight now that they're grown. If Mitt Romney has been too predictable and aloof, tonight he changed that from the minute he walked into the room. Starting from his surprise entrance on the floor, Mitt Romney finally did what everyone has been telling him to do: open up and loosen up.
My mom and dad were married for 64 years. And if you wondered what their secret was, you could have asked the local florist.
He talked family and faith.
We were Mormons, and growing up in Michigan, that might have seemed unusual or out of place, but I really don't remember it that way. My friends cared more about what sports teams we followed than what church we went to.
And he defended his time at Bain Capital, the private equity firm he founded, saying success didn't come easily.
I figured it was bad enough that I might lose my investors' money, but I didn't want to go to hell, too.
He had the crowd laughing and chanting and cheering as he hammered the president.
His policies have not helped create jobs. They've depressed them.
That's misleading. While unemployment is above 8%, the economy has added more than 4 million private sector jobs in the last 2 years. He also made an oft-repeated claim about health care reform.
And it means that we must rein in the skyrocketing cost of health care by repealing and replacing Obamacare.
That's opinion, and virtually impossible if Republicans don't take control of both houses. Still, if some of his promises were dubious, Romney's speech didn't disappoint this crowd.
That future is our destiny. That future is out there. It is waiting for us. Our children deserve it. Our nation depends on it. The peace and freedom of the world require it. And with your help, we will deliver it. Let us begin that future for America tonight. Thank you so very much.
And while Romney talked a lot about who he was, I would argue he did not talk specifically about what he would do to fix the economy. It really wasn't just what Romney said tonight, but how he said it. Often perceived as stiff and guarded, tonight he seemed at ease and open. Next week, Democrats step into the spotlight, and no worries, I will be equally discerning when I reality check their speeches. Live in Tampa, Sean Boyd, CBS 4 News.
CBS 4 political specialist Sean Boyd tonight wrapping up her coverage from Charlotte, North Carolina. Now, Sean, you fact-checked Romney's speech last week. Tonight you do the same for the president's.
Jim, after 3 days of others making a case for his reelection, President Obama came out fighting for his job tonight, telling the crowd times have changed, but so has he. He says he's got a plan that leads to a better place. He laid it out in a 36-minute speech that made so many claims I could spend days fact-checking it.
When you pick up that ballot to vote, you will face the clearest choice of any time in a generation.
If President Obama's message 4 years ago was about a change, this election, it is about a choice.
And if we choose this path, we can create 1 million new manufacturing jobs in the next 4 years.
That's a promise. What you need to know is, while manufacturing jobs are growing again, they are still down by 600,000 since Obama took office.
Independent experts say that my plan would cut our deficit by $4 trillion.
That's misleading. It includes spending cuts Congress made a year ago and ending wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, which has been underway for some time.
I want to reform the tax code so that it's simple, fair, and ask the wealthiest households to pay higher taxes on incomes over $250,000. The same rate we had when Bill Clinton was president?
Not exactly. If the Bush tax cuts expire, the rate goes up to about 39%, the same as under Clinton. But you need to know taxes in the health care law would bump it up to nearly 45%. While his speech had no shortage of spin, Obama also got in a few zingers on Republicans and Mitt Romney.
You might not be ready for diplomacy with Beijing if you can't visit the Olympics without insulting our closest ally. Have a surplus? Try a tax cut. Deficit too high. Try another. Feel a cold coming on? Take 2 tax cuts, roll back some regulations, and call us in the morning.
The choice may not be exactly as Obama laid it out, but this crowd has clearly made its choice.
And if you share that faith with me, if you share that hope with me, I ask you tonight for your vote.
Like Romney's speech last week, Obama's too lacked real specifics on how he would improve the economy, but that's not what these convention speeches are about. At the Republican convention last week, it was all about closing the likability gap for Romney. At this convention, it's about closing the enthusiasm gap for Obama. And by all accounts, this crowd was absolutely energized. But the real test will be among undecideds in states like Colorado. Live in Charlotte, Sean Boyd, CBS 4 News.
The debate was full of promises on taxes, Medicare, and jobs.
And we gave our CBS 4 political specialist, Sean Boyd, the very difficult task of fact-checking all this, giving it a reality check. We come to count on those during the campaign. Right now, we send it to her in what's called the spin zone down in the Ritchie Center. And a very appropriate name, Sean, because debates are all about spin.
Absolutely, Jim. And tonight, of course, both sides spinning this debate as a victory, as expected. Also, as expected, both of the candidates took the stage tonight and took liberties with the truth. They came out smiling, but it didn't take long before they were swinging first on jobs.
Over the last 30 months, we've seen 5 million jobs in the private sector created. The auto industry has come roaring back, and housing has begun to rise.
That's true, but here's what you need to know. More than 2 years after the recession ended, unemployment is still above 8%, and there's been a slowdown in hiring since March. On tax reform, the candidates accused each other of twisting the truth. Obama saying Romney's plan raises taxes on the middle class.
I will not, under any circumstances, raise taxes on middle-income families. I will lower taxes on middle-income families. Now, you cite a study. There's 6 other studies that looked at the study you described and say it's completely wrong.
That's spin. The studies he cites weren't exactly nonpartisan. Many independent economists say the math in his plan doesn't add up. The candidates also were less than honest on deficit reduction.
We all know that we've got to do more. And so I put forward a specific $4 trillion deficit reduction plan. It's on a website. You can look at all the numbers, what cuts we make, and what revenue we raise.
Not exactly. I've debunked this claim before. The figure includes previous savings of $800 billion from winding down the wars. Most of the reduction comes from increasing the tax rate on higher income earners to 45%, not spending cuts. The candidates also spent a good amount of time attacking each other's health care plans, especially on Medicare.
But the idea of cutting $716 billion from Medicare to be able to balance the additional cost of Obamacare is, in my opinion, a mistake.
That's misleading. The president's plan reduces future spending by $700 billion. It doesn't cut a lump sum. Obama says Romney's plan would cost seniors $6,000 more a year, but it's based on an outdated study. And so the candidates predictably distorted each other's positions, but it is the voters who will get the final say. And who they think won isn't only based on substance, but style. Those zingers. And Romney rolled out a new one tonight, saying if the president thinks he supports a trickle-down economy, then the president supports trickle-down government. Of course, the two sides will be spinning this debate from now until the next debate, October 16th. Live in Spin Alley at DU, Sean Boyd, CBS 4 News.
A new political ad making waves, not for the claims, but for the images that it shows. CBS 4 political specialist Sean Boyd gives that ad from the 3rd Congressional District a reality check.
This is a strange one. Sal Pace, the Democratic candidate in the 3rd Congressional race, is out with a new ad that would appear tame, genuine, even sentimental.
I'm lucky my dad's around. Not just because he's nearby. I'm lucky because he's alive.
The ad focuses on Pace's dad, Sal Sr., who he says is retired, just had a heart attack, and depends on Medicare.
Without Medicare, he wouldn't have health care.
In this case, it's not what the ad says, but what it shows that is problematic. You see Pace helping his dad around the house, mowing the lawn, washing the windows, taking out the garbage. Here's what you need to know. The house isn't his dad's, it's someone else's. As for Pace helping out with the chores, that's misleading. Pace's dad lived in Connecticut until this year. He moved into a home in Pueblo in July. That's when this ad was shot. So while Pace may trim his dad's bushes and mow his grass now, He wasn't doing it at the time of this ad, at least not regularly. The visuals are deceiving, but the message, which is really about Pace's opponent, not his dad.
I approve this message because we have to balance the budget without cutting Medicare or raising premiums.
Is technically true. Republican incumbent Scott Tipton did vote in favor of a GOP budget resolution in 2011 that the Congressional Budget Office said would raise Medicare premiums on average $6,400. But here's what you need to know. Tipton has since voted for a revised budget that the CBO says may or may not impact premiums. Bottom line, if you're going to tag this ad as real life, it should be real. All of it. Credibility matters. I'm Sean Boyd. That's Reality Check.
Tonight, Sean is fact-checking a provocative ad in one of Colorado's tightest congressional races. The ad accuses the incumbent of voting against bills that would help victims of child abuse and rape. Our political specialist gives the ad a reality check.
I've had requests to fact-check this ad since it hit the air. In it, Joe Coors, the Republican challenger in the 7th Congressional District, makes some pretty damning claims about Democratic incumbent Ed Perlmutter.
Ed Perlmutter voted against the law that protects victims of child abuse from having to face their abusers in court.
It's true. 16 years ago, as a state senator, Perlmutter voted against a bill that would allow victims of child abuse to testify via closed-circuit TV. Perlmutter says it was a new concept at the time, and he worried it was unconstitutional, even though the U.S. Supreme Court had already ruled closed-circuit TV was constitutional in cases of child sex abuse victims. Perlmutter was one of only 3 lawmakers to vote against the bill. He was also one of only 3 state legislators to vote against a bill aimed at helping rape victims.
And extreme Ed Perlmutter voted against Colorado's law allowing the use of DNA evidence to convict sexual predators years later.
Again, it's true. In 2001, Perlmutter voted against a bill lifting the 10-year statute of limitations in sex assault cases where there is DNA evidence. Again, Perlmutter says he was worried it was unconstitutional, and it was ultimately challenged. Last year, the Colorado Court of Appeals ruled it was, in fact, constitutional. So what do these votes say about Ed Perlmutter?
Extreme? That's Ed Perlmutter.
That's opinion, but here's what you need to know. During his time in the state Senate, Perlmutter also voted for and in some cases co-sponsored at least a dozen bills aimed at helping victims of child abuse, sex abuse, and domestic violence. And he's received recognition from both women's rights and victims' rights groups. Bottom line, I don't know about you, but I hope at the end of the day I am not judged on 1 or 2 decisions I've made or stories I've written, but on the body of my work. Ed Perlmutter has served as a lawmaker for 14 years, and his overall record is one of defending victims' rights. I'm Sean Boyd. That's Reality Check.
More mudslinging in the 7th congressional race.
Last night, our political specialist, Sean Boyd, broke down the claims in an ad by Republican challenger Joe Coors. Tonight, Sean gives an ad by the Democratic incumbent Ed Perlmutter, a reality check.
This ad hitting on a well-worn and emotionally charged subject this election, the shipping of American jobs overseas. It's from Democratic incumbent Ed Perlmutter in the 7th Congressional District. It begins by touting his efforts to stop outsourcing.
I'm part of a group of Democrats and Republicans working to pass Make It in America laws to help more businesses like this create more American jobs.
That's true. The legislative record shows at least 3 measures Perlmutter has voted for or co-sponsored, including the Bring Our Jobs Home Act, Currency Reform for Fair Trade Act, and U.S. Manufacturing Enhancement Act. Perlmutter claims while he's trying to keep jobs here, his opponent, Republican Joe Coors, is sending them to Asia.
But Joe Coors, he has a different idea. As CEO of Coors Tech, Coors outsourced manufacturing jobs to Asia.
That's spin. Here's what you need to know. In 1999, Coors Tech, a high-tech industrial ceramics manufacturer, bought a plant in South Korea. This was an acquisition for Coors Tech, in addition to its U.S. operations. It did not close a plant here and fire people here to open the plant there. Coors Tech has several U.S. customers who have operations in South Korea. Documents I have indicate the acquisition was to better service those customers. Coors Tech has added more than 600 jobs in the U.S. since opening the Korean facility, which employs 61 people compared to the more than 2,600 in the U.S. Bottom line, we live in a global economy. The fact is, most major companies have operations in other parts of the world, in some cases to get better economies of scale, in others to build foreign markets, to be more competitive. It's no wonder Perlmutter would bring up the outsourcing charge. It's inflammatory for sure. But in the case of Coors Tech, it's also unfair. This is a U.S. company that has a record as a job creator, not job destroyer. I'm Sean Boyd. That's Reality Check.
CBS 4 political specialist Sean Boyd gives that ad a reality check.
Do you support work for
If the Romney campaign is to be believed, President Obama wants to let welfare recipients sit around and mooch off the government with no strings attached. This is Romney's second ad in as many weeks, claiming Obama gutted welfare reform by dropping work requirements.
On July 12th, Obama quietly ended work requirements for welfare.
That is highly misleading. Here's what you need to know. In 1996, President Bill Clinton signed a bill overhauling welfare reform. Its goal was to end the cycle of dependency by setting a 5-year limit on how long anyone could receive aid and requiring them to find jobs within 2 years or lose aid. Under the law, states had to document the number of hours recipients spent working, looking for work, or training for work, and meet quotas. Several states complained they were spending more time complying with the requirements than helping people find jobs. So the president directed his administration to work with states to find more flexibility. Last month, the Department of Health and Human Services issued a new policy saying it would consider granting states waivers from welfare work requirements. The ad makes a leap here.
You wouldn't have to work and wouldn't have to train for a job.
That's a huge stretch. Here's what the new policy says. States may receive a waiver if they submit a plan that makes changes intended to lead to more effective means of meeting the work goals. So we're talking about changing work requirements, not eliminating them, which may mean dropping some rules on job searches or training. But the policy makes it clear repeatedly the goal is to move more people from welfare to work. And it says it will hold states accountable by requiring an evaluation plan, set of performance measures and interim targets, and may revoke waivers for plans that don't work. It's interesting. As governor of Massachusetts, Mitt Romney signed a letter urging Congress to pass an extension of the welfare law that, while increasing work requirements, also ask for more flexibility for states and increased waiver authority. Bottom line, this ad is part of a Romney strategy to frame the president as big government, willing to dole out checks even as the deficit soars. But the welfare changes are clearly meant to get more people off the government dole. I'm Sean Boyd. That's Reality Check.
The Obama campaign is framing Mitt Romney as enemy number one of college students. A new ad claims Romney would make college harder to afford. CBS 4 political specialist Sean Boyd gives that ad a reality check.
Here we go with the budget games. In this ad, the Obama campaign spinning the numbers.
Romney's plans could cut college aid for nearly 10 million students.
That's misleading. Romney has never proposed cutting college aid. The ad is referring to the Republican budget, which calls for, among other things, tightening eligibility requirements for Pell Grants. Here's what you need to know. Government spending on the federal student loan program has grown 50% in the last 4 years, in part because the government eased eligibility requirements. While the stimulus propped it up for a time, unless something is done, Congress will need to come up with an additional $10 billion for the program in 2014. The Obama campaign assumes, and it has no evidence, that the Republican budget will cut the $10 billion across the board, meaning every single student who receives a grant, there are 10 million of them, will see their aid cut. That's a huge overreach. The Republican budget doesn't give specifics. Neither does the president's, for that matter. Budget resolutions rarely do. As for the second claim about Romney's plan,
And eliminate the tax deduction for college tuition.
This, too, is wildly misleading. It's based on Romney's tax plan, which calls for eliminating some of the deductions and loopholes in the tax code. But it doesn't specify which ones. The Obama campaign is again assuming it would cut the college tuition deduction. As for the last claim,
President Obama eliminated bank middlemen from college loans and used the savings to double college grants.
that's true. A provision in Obamacare puts the government, not banks, in charge of arranging student loans, a savings of up to $60 billion over 10 years. Republicans fought the move. Bottom line, young voters were key in electing Obama in 2008, but the economy has caused many to sour on the president. In Colorado, almost as many young people are registered as independents this year than Democrats and Republicans combined. This ad, an attempt to win them back, even if it means stretching the truth. I'm Sean Boyd. That's Reality Check.
And now to Campaign 2012, which is on track to be the most expensive in history. Fundraising has now passed the $2 billion mark, and a lot of that money has gone to TV ads in swing states, including Colorado. CBS 4 political specialist Sean Boyd has given a lot of those ads reality checks this election. Tonight, she breaks down the most common claims we've been hearing.
More money than ever meant more mudslinging than ever this election. A barrage of ads blanketed the airwaves, especially in battleground Colorado. In this final installment of Reality Check, the most overused and overheated charges of this race.
Mitt Romney's firms were pioneers at helping companies outsource their manufacturing to countries including China.
This well-worn claim, highly misleading. It wasn't until after Romney left Bain Capital that the company invested in firms that helped offshore jobs. The Obama team beat the Bain Capital story to death, while Team Romney hammered home a Metascare message.
You paid into Medicare for years. Every paycheck. Now when you need it, Obama has cut $716 billion from Medicare.
Not exactly. The new health care law identifies savings of $716 billion over 10 years. It doesn't cut a lump sum. Women's health care also the subject of ad after ad.
Mitt Romney's for ending funding to Planned Parenthood, including cancer screenings. He said he'd overturn Roe v. Wade.
It's true. Romney is opposed to federal funding for Planned Parenthood, which provides cancer screenings but not mammograms, as many ads claimed. Romney is also anti-abortion, but makes exceptions for rape, incest, and a mother's life. If Democrats' goal was to frame Romney as anti-women, those binders full of women, Republicans was to brand the president as anti-business. You didn't build that. The economy, no surprise, the subject of countless attack ads against Obama.
Where are the jobs you promised? The trillions you spent, where'd it all go? What's there to show for all that new debt?
Here's what you need to know. The country has slightly more jobs today, about 325,000, than when the president took office. The debt has risen about $5 trillion, nearly a third of that the result of the stimulus and tax cuts. And the Congressional Budget Office says the stimulus helped create or retain at least 1.5 million jobs. Bottom line, it would appear both campaigns subscribe to the theory if you say something often enough, people will start to believe you. But in this race to the bottom, nobody wins. I'm Sean Boyd, and that's Reality Check.